Hello, everyone. We're so happy to have you here with us on the Stronger Marriage webinar produced by the Utah Marriage Commission, hosted by Utah State University. I'm Alexis Alcott, the UMC Interim Program Coordinator, and we're excited to have you join us today as we celebrate 25 years of marriage celebrations in 2023. A big part of these marriage celebrations and the work we do around marriage is these webinars, and we're so excited to be joined today by Tyler Patrick. Tyler is a marriage and family therapist who has dedicated his life to mastering and understanding recovery from sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. He has come to believe that the men and women who embrace and live the principles of recovery do far more than get their lives back. They become the best kinds of husbands and wives, fathers and mothers. He feels privileged to act as a guide and support to those who embark in the life transformation of living a connected lifestyle. In his webinar today, you will learn the definition of shame, get an explanation of the cycle of shame, have a discussion of common shame screens that we use that block us from connection with others, and gain practical tools for developing greater resilience to shame. If you have any questions, please ask them by entering your questions to the Q&A function. It's just at the bottom of your screens. The chat will be turned off during the entirety of his presentation, so this is really the best place to ask Tyler any questions you might have. We will have a 15-minute Q&A at the end of his presentation, so write down your questions and save them for the end. If you've joined us today for the CEU credit, make sure to stay until the end of the presentation. The survey needed for your credit will automatically load onto the screen, and then you'll receive an email from the Utah Marriage Commission with your certificate. You may also email the Utah Marriage Commission at marriagecommission@usu.edu to receive your survey on this webinar. Once the survey is completed, you will obtain an email with your CEU credit certification. We'll now turn the time over to Tyler for his presentation.
Thank you, Alexis. I am really excited to be here with you. It's always good to come back home in a certain way. I graduated with my degree a long time ago from Utah State with my degree in marriage and family therapy. And so it's really nice to be back with such an awesome organization. And I'm really excited to be with you who are here. I have a couple of things that I'm going to go through with you tonight. And my hope is that you'll be able to feel some things and not just learn some things, because I think that the learning that we want to have in our lives happens best when there's also some feeling. So to start off with, what I'd like to do is just a really quick mindfulness exercise. I'm going to show this first slide, and I want you to just pay attention to what goes through you in terms of what you think, what emotions come up for you, and also what kinds of physical sensations you have in your body just by looking at the first slide and reading the first question. So as you take a look at this, what's your secret? We all kind of have secrets. Most of us do. Most of us think we're pretty open on certain things, but there's something that most of us think we have that nobody could understand, or that's so painful or so dark that if anybody saw it, they wouldn't want to be with us, or they would judge us. And so we tell ourselves we're going to take it to the grave. Now, as you look and feel what your secret is, and I hope I'm not going to cause a whole bunch of other deep discussions if you're sitting there with your partner right now after we're done, but if we do, that's okay, because it's okay to talk about these things. Notice what your experience is when you think about your secret. What comes up inside, especially inside your chest, your stomach, your heart rate, your hands, are they sweaty? Do muscles tighten up inside of you? What are the thoughts that come up around your secret? And is there some level of a feeling of vulnerability as if something's going to be exposed? Likely, what you're experiencing is possibly what we're going to be talking about today. And that topic is the topic of shame. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about shame, what it is. We're going to talk about how it operates in our lives kind of on a personal level. And then we're also going to talk mostly about how that affects the relationships that we engage in, and then what we can do to become resilient to shame, because shame is a disconnector. Shame pulls us away from all forms of connection from ourselves, heart and mind, connection from people that we love, connection from the world around us, and even at our higher power. It's something that pulls us away from connection. And so if we can become resilient to it, we can actually experience deeper connection in all levels of life. So a couple of definitions for shame that I want to go through with you. This one is first comes from Brené Brown. Brené Brown, most of you have probably heard of her. She's kind of at the forefront of all of the shame research that goes on right now. This is her definition of shame, and I like it. And then I'm going to give you another definition by Carl Jung. And she says that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something that we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. So it's a pretty long definition, but basically there's something about us that makes us unworthy of being loved. And that's really scary for us as human beings, even though the experience of shame is universal. Every person experiences shame from time to time. It's that feeling that if it gets seen, our weakness, our frailty, our unworthiness, then we will not be worthy of connection with others. And that happens to be our biggest need as a human being. We can't survive alone, right? What's one of the biggest punishments that we can give anybody is to put them in solitary confinement. Some of you have maybe seen this new sound booth that they've come up with. It's like the most soundproof place in the entire world. And they have people go in there, and people can't last more than a few minutes inside of this chamber that's totally devoid of all sound, because they can't stand to be alone with their own thoughts for that long without some other kinds of noise or distraction, right? So the next definition is the Carl Jung definition. And I like this definition a lot because I think it feels this way to me when I think about my own shame. Shame is a soul-eating emotion. Simply, shame feeds on itself. It survives in the darkest recesses of one's insecure, self-loathing, and self-doubting mind. Shame needs fear and negativity to survive. And I would add to that shame also needs secrecy. Shame's best friend is secrecy, because we don't want anything to be exposed. So back to my question, what's your secret? I actually want to share one of my secrets with you. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been doing this work. I work with people with addictions, betrayal, affairs, trauma. I've been doing it for the past 15 plus years now. But my secret is that I'm actually traveling the same path that I help my clients with. My secret is that about 15 years ago, I nearly destroyed my marriage and burnt it to the ground, because I was so caught in the cycle of shame that I was unraveling all of the meaningful connections in my life, including the connection with my wife and my children. So the things that I'm going to teach you guys today are not just things that I learned at school, although they're all researched, but they're also very personal to me, because they have been part of the road of my own life and part of the road of the redemption of my own marriage. So the cycle of shame is interesting because most people will relate to it on some level. And it starts with a core belief that says, I am basically blank. You can fill in your own blank for this, but it's the negative criticism that resides inside your own mind. I'm weak. I'm inadequate. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. I'm not skinny enough. I'm not smart enough. Whatever that judgment is the foundational belief of shame. For me, it's failure. I was always afraid of being a failure or being seen as a failure in the eyes of first my parents and then my wife or anybody else that was important to me. And that belief, we have life experiences that actually start to confirm that it's true. And so those life experiences could be seen as what we call little forms of trauma, or sometimes big forms of trauma, but then they become the proof that we're not good enough. And so as I grow up and I have this belief that I'm a failure, or this fear that I'm a failure, I somehow have experiences that find proof of that. And then that instills the next belief, which is the fear. And the second belief of the shame cycle is, if people actually see this in me, they won't love me, they'll judge me, and they'll reject me. And so in order to not allow people to actually see me, I create and I live through a set of what we call masks, or the mask. I become a performer in my own life, and I start to act in ways that I think other people want me to act in order to not be rejected. But in the meantime, I never feel good enough about myself. And it causes this sort of split, or this dissonance between what I would think is my real self versus what people see. And the masks can go all sorts of different ways, and you can kind of think of your own here for a minute, but maybe I overcompensate. So my personal masks include overcompensation. I'm a self-proclaimed workaholic in recovery. I can work really, really hard, long hours, and I can really enjoy it at the expense of other things in my life. But then people come to me and say, Tyler, like you're one of the hardest working people that I know. And when I hear that compliment, I don't go, oh, thank you. Yes, that's true. I go, on the inside, I go, man, if you only knew. Like I'm neglecting a lot of other things, and I don't ever feel good enough, right? So that might be overcompensation at church or at work or at home. Sometimes it's under functioning. Sometimes I actually self-sabotage so that I don't have to excel, or I don't have to be in the arena, because if I'm not in the arena, then I can't fail. And sometimes that looks like depression, and I sort of withdraw and pull away from people. Sometimes the mask is actually being the life of the party and being the funny person who tells all the jokes, but never actually feels connected to people, because we never allow people in. And what we're doing is we're setting our own prison cells, so to speak, where what we want most is connection, but now we're keeping people at arm's length to never actually see who we think we really are. And that fuels the next belief of the shame cycle, which is, I can't trust anybody else. I'm totally alone. I can only rely on myself. And we sometimes package that up in other ways where we say, I should be strong enough to take care of things on my own, or I don't want to be a burden to other people. But what we're really saying is, we're saying, I can't allow people to see me or help me because of that other fear that we just talked about. So what we do is we work ourselves into a place where we're kind of stuck, because we want connection. We can't let people see us to give us connection the way that we need it. We try to perform for it, but it never feels good enough. And that's called the control part of the cycle, where we're trying to overperform, but then life happens and we get bored, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, hungry. We have sick kids, whatever it is. We have a fight with our spouse, and eventually we need an outlet. And that turns into what we call the acting out. And you guys, we all have our favorites. It might be alcohol or drugs. It could be overeating with food. It could be media. It could be pornography. It could be social media. It could be video games. We all have our favorites. And the crazy thing is that these things all work to provide some sort of medicine to the shame that we're feeling about not being good enough or not being able to keep up with life. But they also get paired with a feeling of either guilt or numbness. And that guilt should motivate us to change and say, geez, Tyler, you probably shouldn't, stop by Maverick and buy 3 corn dogs and a burrito after a hard session with a client, right? But instead, the guilt converts itself to what we call toxic shame. So guilt says, whoops, I made a mistake. I'm doing things that are outside my value system. I need to repair those things. I need to get real with those things. Shame says, no. What you just did is proof that you're not good enough. And eventually we end up in this spiral that's working itself downward. And we can't figure out how we got there. And then all of a sudden we're looking up out of a tunnel going, man, I feel alone. I'm doing things that don't line up with my values. And I feel like kind of helpless now because I haven't even seen it coming for a while. That cycle is part of the human condition for so many people. I imagine if you were to turn to your partner and actually ask if it's true that they've felt some of this cycle, so often both partners will say, man, this is my life. Like, I experience a lot of these things. And what's interesting is that when you put two people together who are operating from the fuel of shame, what they're looking for is connection, but neither of them are in a place to give connection to the other because they're so afraid of being exposed. And so what we do when we're in that cycle of shame is we resort to three things. And these are some things that you guys can kind of pay attention to, and some language that you can start to use inside of your relationships with, whether it's with your partners or your children or anyone, even people at work. We resort to what we call 3 shame screens. And the first shame screen is moving away. So if I'm experiencing shame, maybe my wife comes to me and she says, hey, Tyler, like, you've been working way too much and it seems like everybody else's marriages are more important than ours are. If that hits my shame and I'm like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm a horrible husband, I'm not good enough, you deserve somebody different, that's me moving away from my wife. I want to go disappear. I want to go climb under the covers in bed and say goodbye, cruel world, for the day. I want to shut down and not continue the conversation because I don't think I can handle it or I'm not good enough. That's the moving away shame screen. So it's disappearing, pulling away from any type of conflict, trying to go and hide. A lot of times this is associated with feeling victimized too, like something is not fair, something's not right, I'm being mistreated, so I'm going to go disappear. The second shame screen is what we call moving toward, and this is all in Brene Brown's books. So if any of you read Brene Brown's books, you'll see this language in there. Moving towards is overperforming. So if my wife says the same things to me, Tyler, I think everybody else's marriages are more important than ours are to you, and I feel this shame and I'm like, oh no, I'm not good enough, I might hurry and scramble and I'm going to bring home 24 roses, like the country song says, or her favorite chocolates, or I'm going to come home and start scrambling around the house to help clean up the dishes and take the kids out and be super dad. That's moving towards, where I'm trying to fix the situation in my relationship, but I'm not necessarily doing it to actually show love for my partner. I'm doing it because I'm afraid that I'm going to get seen as an imposter or I'm going to get rejected. So I'm actually doing it to manage my partner's feelings so that I don't have to deal with the feeling of shame that I'm experiencing. That's the moving towards shame screen. And then the third shame screen is moving against. And this is the defensive shame screen. This is where I'm going to look for a way to attack back because I feel threatened. It's kind of like having a cornered wild animal, right? Normally they may not be very aggressive, but if they have nowhere else to go, then they feel like they have to bite back because that's the only option that they have. So my wife says, hey, Tyler, seems like everybody else's marriage is more important to you than ours is. And because you're always spending your time extra at work or whatever, and you don't ever spend a lot of time, we haven't been on a date in forever, whatever. And I say something like, no, the reason our marriage is not any good is because you'd rather spend all your time watching British murder mysteries, right? That's the moving against shame screen. I'm backing her off by attacking her, looking for a way to cut deep so that she can't continue to come into the space where I feel vulnerable. And so as you guys are listening to this, you're probably looking at your core relationships right now and maybe even starting to see the ways that people interact with you right now, the shame screens that they might be using in the ways that you interact, whether that's at work or with your children. And maybe you're even looking at yourself and going, oh, that makes sense. That's why I do this or this or this when I have a disagreement or when I feel like I've messed up in my relationship. Being aware of these things is extremely important because it's a big part of learning to turn this around and to become resilient to it. So those are the 3 shame screens. I want to move into how this plays out inside of a relationship in a kind of a common pattern. So this pattern that I'm going to go through with you right now is based off of some of Susan Johnson's work. So any of you who want to go find more on this, if you go to Susan Johnson's work, the books are Love Sense, or hold me tight, you'll see similar things to what I'm going to talk about here. Each side represents one partner. And so there's a series of things that take place inside of our interactions that become a cycle. You're going to see behaviors. There's going to be what we call secondary emotions, which are the emotions that actually get seen and demonstrated to the other partner. There's primary emotions, which sometimes don't often get shown or exposed to the other partner. And then there's the core beliefs, and that's where the shameful beliefs, or what Susan Johnson calls the attachment wounds, reside. The places where we feel the most insecure. And what we end up with is this, she calls it a tango. It's like a dance we do with our partner that is an interesting dance, because what we want in this dance is connection. We want to be seen. We want to be respected. We want to be appreciated. But it's missing a key element in being able to be vulnerable with each other. So it becomes a dance of disconnection, even though the pursuit is for connection. And I'll walk you through how this works for a second. So we could start on either corner. It doesn't matter where it starts. It's like an infinity sign. But my wife comes to me, and maybe she comes to me in sort of a defensive tone, and she says, "Hey, Tyler, like, why does every other woman that you work with get more of your energy and attention than I do?" Okay. What she's hoping for is that I hear that somewhere down here, she's feeling like a failure, not loved, not appreciated, whatever that is. But instead, what it does is that behavior goes through a filtering system in my system that goes all the way down to the bottom of I'm not loved, or I'm a failure, right? And now I have that button gets hit that I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. And that institutes my feelings of shame, fear, insecurity. And I don't want to show her that I'm feeling that, because that's what shame is it says you're going to get rejected if it gets exposed. So I quickly come up with some other secondary emotion, which is a safer emotion to expose. And maybe it's apathy. And I go, well, like, whatever, I don't care. Maybe I stonewall her and I go to disappear and I shut down, or I go, you know what, you're right. You deserve somebody better. You should have married somebody else. Like, there's so many other better men out there than I am. Right. So there's my behavior. And now I'm trying to back her off and go into self-protection. But what the message is that I'm sending is that she hears, I'm not loved. I'm not seen. I'm not cherished. I'm not respected. I'm not chosen. And maybe she even has some past experience with some abandonment from other forms of trauma. And so that activates her sense of shame. That leads to her feeling fearful or devalued, primary emotions. But she doesn't like feeling vulnerable there. So she becomes angry. And then she ends up being defensive and firing back some other cutting remark, which then goes through the loop again. And eventually we're doing this dance with each other where what we want is to come together, and instead we're being pushed apart. And so the interesting thing about this cycle is that both partners think the other partner should just see what they actually mean. But there's been a filtering system that doesn't allow for that to happen unless there's some real consciousness about what's really going on with the cycle. So if my wife comes to me and says those things to me, and I happen to be in a good enough spot or a shame resilient enough spot, I can have my own failure get hit for a second, but I can catch it and I can put that to the side for a moment and then actually respond to her of what I think she just said. So instead of going and getting defensive myself, I might say, oh, the fact that you just said that tells me that you might not be feeling loved right now, or might not be feeling seen. Is that actually what you mean? Now I'm cutting straight through all of the other disguises and filters that she's had built up to try to protect her. And I'm trying to get to where I can connect at a lower, more meaningful level. And so I want to talk a little bit about some ways to do that inside of our relationships, and some tools to use to help manage our own shame, and also help to be more mindful of the shame of our partners. So this cycle, I've kind of built off a tail, and this could go on both sides. But if I can recognize the dance that we're in, which is the very first step, it only takes one person in the cycle to recognize it and break free from that cycle. If I can recognize the cycle that we're in, it gives me power to make different choices. So the autopilot goes straight up and continues the cycle, but the conscious, intentional person can follow some of these things. So the first thing is to recognize it. And certain ways to recognize it. You'll recognize it in the language that you or your partner is using. There's certain key words that couples will use. So then when my wife uses those kinds of things like everybody else is more important, that's a cue for me to recognize the cycle. Sometimes it'll be through physiology. I have this kind of tell inside myself where I know that I'm getting into the cycle a lot of times when my jaw clenches. I clenched my jaw and I have this little muscle that starts to pop out in my jaw. My wife will sometimes see that muscle before I even recognize that I'm clenching my jaw, and she'll be the one to recognize the cycle. And she'll say, hey, Tyler, like you're kind of going into drama right now, or I think we're in drama right now. Or, hey, maybe we need to take a time out and not talk about this for a second because it looks like we're in the cycle, right? So it might be in the physiology. There might be certain tells, sweaty hands, certain feelings inside your core, things that we talked about at the beginning when you looked at that secret. So when you recognize the cycle, you can pause, and sometimes just recognizing the cycle might mean that we have to take a small time out to let the emotions come down. And during that time out, you can continue to do this, or if you don't need a time out, you can continue to do this anyway. The next step is to choose compassion. We're going to talk more about the compassion process in a few minutes, but to choose to try to find compassion for self first inside of this, that shame that we're feeling, it needs to be acknowledged. So even if I'm still listening to my wife as she's talking, I can acknowledge that I have my own shame going, and I can experience compassion, human compassion for the shame that I'm feeling, and just acknowledge that it's there. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail in just a second with a tool. Once I'm choosing compassion for myself, I try to find compassion for my partner. I tried to reframe whatever it is that they were doing that was making me feel the shame into a different version of that doesn't include me taking it personally. It's more about them. I'm learning something about them. They're sending me a message about them. I heard a quote one time that I think is interesting inside of relationships that's been really powerful for me in my own relationship. And it says that whenever somebody that you're in a relationship with is doing something you don't like, it is either an act of love or a cry for help. And I wonder if we actually were to take the time and look at whatever our partners do that annoy us from that lens. This has to be either an act of service or an act of love or a cry for help. So now my wife comes to me and she says, Tyler, you're too busy with everybody else. You're neglecting our relationship. That could be an act of love by saying, Tyler, I need more time with you, and I want more time with you, and I value our relationship. Or it could be a cry for help, saying, I'm feeling really neglected and I need you to see me. Right? I might be the one that has to change the language because she's not feeling vulnerable enough to say it. So if I can get to where I can choose compassion and not take it personal, it gives me more power to actually help things go right. Then I need to connect to my values. And why this is important is because I can lose touch with my values if shame is in the driver's seat. I do things that are outside of my value system when shame is in the driver's seat. I might not only just do the acting out things like numbing out with all of those ways we talked about, but maybe I'm going to say things that I regret or that I know aren't going to be good for my marriage or that aren't in line with the kind of husband or man that I want to be to my wife. And so I need to connect back to my values. I want to be somebody who supports the people I love. I want to be somebody who operates from a place of respect with the people that I love. I want to be someone who can provide for the emotional needs of my wife and my children. And so if I can connect myself back to my values, Now I can see my partner with a new set of eyes, and I can start to look for how I'm going to respond to her in a more shame resilient and a much more effective way, where I can invite more connection instead of fueling the cycle. The last part is to identify your partner's emotion. So instead of making it about you, you've climbed out of that hole now. You can make it about what your partner's emotion, and then speak back, whatever way we talk about speaking, whether that's nonverbal or verbal, body language or otherwise, speak back at the core feeling that must be there instead of the behavior that they gave you. And if you get one person to follow this pattern, you instantly invite the cycle to break. So I want to just kind of break a couple of these things down a little bit further. Choosing compassion, living with congruency, and then speaking empathy. The first one I want to talk about with you guys is something called context. There's 3 C's of shame resiliency we'll talk about here that can be used to help break the cycle. The first one is context. And with context, what that means is shame has a way of wanting to pull us into a place of thinking we're the only ones. It makes us feel like, whatever it was that was your secret. Maybe we struggle with infertility. Maybe there's infidelity. Maybe there's past childhood trauma that I don't ever want anybody to know about. Whatever that is, maybe I'm the only person in $100 billion industry with pornography that has a pornography addiction. Whatever that is, shame insulates and isolates, meaning it pulls us away from the truth and it pulls us away from connection. So one way to build shame resiliency is to actually add context around whatever it is that we feel shame over. So what's the bigger picture? Let's get a clear picture of what is actually going on. How many people struggle with some form of infertility? Well, the statistics are a little bit varied, but they're anywhere from 25 to 33% of couples that struggle with some form of infertility. Yet I think I'm the only one. I just mentioned something like a pornography addiction, $100 billion a year industry. I happen to have a problem with pornography and I've never even spent money on it, yet I'm the only one. When I actually add some education around the shameful things that I feel, childhood sexual abuse, 1 in 3 women, and that might be underreported because people feel shame to report it. And yet I might be the only one. When I actually add the statistics around the bigger picture around what my shame is, it allows me to not be alone. And that's really important because it wants us to be alone. So can I add the bigger picture? When I look at my wife responding to me the way that she is, can I see the bigger picture of what's behind that? What's her story? What's actually happened to her in her life that would make her feel less valued or not important or abandoned when I haven't come home from work at the time that I said I would? Can I understand that and have a bigger picture? The second C is compassion. And I want to talk with you about the principles of something called self-compassion. This is another, I think, very powerful tool. It's been life-altering for me personally, and it's been altering for our marriage. If you're interested in this, you can look at selfcompassion.org. It's Kristen Neff's work, Neff, and you can go to selfcompassion.org. There's all sorts of different exercises, meditations. There's even a kind of a test you can go and take on how self-compassionate you are. Really good resource. But there's 3 main components of self-compassion that I want to talk about with you today. The first one is mindfulness. Becoming aware when I'm in my shame or any other painful emotion, but we're talking about shame today. So what does my shame feel like? And I use something called the triangle of awareness, which is where you're going to connect physical sensations to the thought processes that are going on and then give it a name emotionally. So I feel my head start to kind of go cloudy. I feel my head start to drop. My shoulders start to come in. I feel this like sinking pit in my stomach. I feel heavy. That's the way that I experience my shame most often. When I start to feel those things, I'm just going to acknowledge that that's my shame. I'm going to see if there's any thought going through me. So maybe I get done with this presentation tonight and I start going through all the ways that I messed up and I should have said something different. And I start to feel that shame. Then I catch the thoughts and I've got, Tyler, you're a failure. Tyler, you didn't articulate yourself well enough, whatever that is. Oh, there's my shame. Once I acknowledge the emotion, I say, I'm experiencing a moment of suffering. That's what it is. That's all shame is. It's just a moment of suffering. It's just part of the human condition. It's just a moment, though. That's the mindfulness part. Then it moves to the second piece, which is called common humanity. And with common humanity, I'm going to bring in that context piece a little bit, and I'm going to remind myself that what I'm experiencing makes me human. It's evidence of my humanness. Everybody feels shame once in a while. In fact, right now in the world, there's probably millions, if not billions of people that might be feeling shame right now too. So what I'm feeling is human. I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. This is just part of my existence. And then the last part is the self-compassion part. And the self-compassion part is treat yourself, talk to yourself as if you were talking to your best friend. Because we happen to be pretty critical of ourselves, most of us. Most of us are a lot harder on ourselves than we are on our best friends. So, and I actually do a little exercise with this. If you want to do it with me, you can put your hand right over your heart on this third part. And I press it pretty tight. And I take a deep breath and I imagine the feeling of the warmth from my hand. It's actually warmer in the palm of my hand than it is in my chest. I imagine the warmth from the palm of my hand going into my core, and with each breath, letting it spread slowly through my core. And then while that physical spread is happening of the warmth, I will say what I would say to my best friend. Hey, Tyler, like, not everybody knocks it out of the park every time. You're actually pretty gifted at what you do. It's okay to be a work in progress. You've got this. It's okay. You're going to be all right. I love you. I'm so glad you are who you are. Right. And then I'm going to practice that. And then I'm going to let it go. And the cool thing about the self-compassion exercise is that once you start to kind of just get in the habit and the practice of it, you can do it 100 times a day if you want to. And repetition is what built the shame cycle. Repetition is also what will break the shame cycle. Healthy repetition of self-compassion. The last C we're going to talk about is, and this comes from Brene Brown's work, she calls it courage. And her definition of courage is an interesting definition. I like this definition. She says that courage, she uses the Latin, courage is to tell the whole story of who you are with your whole heart. You can't have courage without fear or vulnerability. And vulnerability is necessary for deep connection with anything or anybody. So vulnerability is also how we can get hurt, but it's also the birthplace of connection. And so we have to learn how to share the story of who we are with our whole heart to the right people who are willing to cherish that story and respect us and love us despite even all of its ugliness. And so there's a skill that is maybe the most important thing in anything that we could do to be shame resilient that I want to talk with you about. This is the 4-part skill that Brene Brown talks about of empathy. And empathy requires 4 things. The first one is called perspective taking. And as perspective taking, it's about getting out of my own shoes and getting into the shoes of the person I'm interacting with. So I need to put myself squarely in the shoes of my partner when she comes to me and says, Tyler, I'm feeling neglected. I haven't had much time with you and I really want to have some time with you. I need to get out of myself and put myself directly in her shoes and go, you know what? She's been neglected for a while. Actually, it's probably true. I need to give her some more attention and I can see why she's feeling the way she does. If I was in her shoes, I would probably feel this, or this. The second part of empathy is to remove judgment, which means I don't insert my preconceived judgments on whatever she's bringing me. So she comes and says, Tyler, I need your time. I haven't seen any bit of you. And I have these judgments of, and why is she being so needy? Or, oh, why am I so bad? Or I'm a terrible husband, or I need to remove all judgment. And what this means in a kind of a mindfulness term is I need to learn to let go of any labels or values. What my wife is doing isn't good or bad. There's no judgment in it. I'm just looking at her perspective without any labels or values. The third part is to connect to the emotion that my wife might be feeling. So, what is it that she might be feeling? She might be feeling sad. She might be feeling abandoned. She might be feeling neglected. I may not have the same past experience as her, but I'm human. And so I have experienced feeling sad, unimportant, neglected in other ways. If I can connect my heart to what those emotions feel like, I'm not making it about me, but I'm connecting to the emotion so that I can be attuned to my partner when I go to the fourth part, which is to speak it. And speaking it doesn't necessarily mean with words. Quick story on the speaking it. I had a long time ago, I had a church leader who had their daughter die in a car accident. And about a year and a half after the accident had happened, going obviously through, I can only imagine what kind of grief, he got up in our church and he gave a talk, and he called the talk the Drive-By Casserole. And he kind of just said, hey, it's been a really dark year and a half for my family. I want to say thank you to everybody who's come and supported us. We had to go buy an extra refrigerator to put all of the food and casseroles that people brought by. And I just want to say thank you to you for everyone who came to support me. But he said, I want to talk specifically to 3 different people, and you know who you are. He said, in a year and a half's time, I've got all this outpouring of love, but there were 3 instances where people out of the blue showed up on my doorstep and knocked on the door. And when I answered the door, they just reached out and gave me a hug with tears in their eyes. And he said, those 3 times were more valuable than all of the casseroles, because it was somebody's way of stepping into his space and being willing to go to that dark place with him and say, I'm here with you. I'm here with you. That's what empathy is. It's being with somebody. It's not making it about me. It's not saying, oh, that's terrible that you're in that space. It's saying, I see you. I'm here for you. I'm willing to be in this space with you. And if we can do that, that instantly brings connection. So showing our partner that we're there for them, being willing to receive them when they show up being there for us, even if our pride or our shame is in the way, being able to receive those things. So I believe that empathy is actually the world's greatest superpower. If you master the skill and art of empathy, the ability to connect with people becomes so much deeper and so much easier. And the satisfaction that comes inside of our relationships becomes extremely vibrant and rewarding. And so I'll just end with this, with empathy, that quote by Henry David Thoreau says, could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant? And it's my belief that if we'll do the internal work on ourselves to practice those 3 C's of shame, resiliency, find a place to tell our story, to a place that can hold it, practice context and realize that we're not alone, and practice compassion for ourselves and for others, that we will find satisfaction in our marriage, and we will bulletproof our marriage from some of the inevitable challenges that every single marriage faces through the course of a lifetime. So thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tyler. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A function that's down at the bottom of your screen. We did already have one question that came in that said, how do I empathetically show up for people when I don't mentally feel like I have much to give?
That's actually a really good question, because empathy takes the giving of self. And so I'm not sure if there's more context. If there is, please type it in here. But one of the key elements that we didn't talk about in the presentation today, but I think is extremely important, is a concept we call self-care. And self-care is where I invest in cultivating my heart on a regular basis, even a daily basis, so that I have emotional energy to draw from. And sometimes we're exhausted. In our profession, there's something called empathy fatigue or caregiver fatigue. And I know that, like, when I'm getting burned out, I'll have a client in my office that's telling me a story that I know in my head I should be connecting to and feeling with them, and I'm just not quite connecting there. And that tells me that I'm kind of in that empty space. And that's the signal for me to up my self-care. I need to actually prioritize doing the things that connect me to my purpose and my heart again. And for me, those things are things like going up in nature, spending time training my dog, spending time playing games with my kids, sometimes just some quiet meditation. And filling that tank back up then allows me to give again. And so it's really important to take care of ourselves in that process.
Thank you. Our next question says, how do I help my spouse when I disagree with their choice that they made? Nothing serious.
Okay. How do I help my spouse when I disagree with the choice they made? This is a great question, because this is like right at the crux of a lot of other things, including how do I show empathy to my partner when I don't agree with what they did, right? So people sometimes confuse agreeing with your partner as empathy and as support, and it's not actually the case. The best relationships are where two individuals know that they're their own individuals and they choose to interact with each other for the sake of the greater good, knowing that there will be some friction points and that it's okay that my partner might feel a different way than I do. So if I go and I make a decision today that my wife doesn't agree with, maybe I go and spend some money that we shouldn't have spent today, and I'm really thrilled about it. I'm so excited that I just went and got some new thing from the sporting goods store, even though it wasn't in the budget. And then I come home and she's upset with me. Is there a way for her to show empathy for me while also being honest with her own feelings? And the answer to that is yes. She can say something like, yeah, Tyler, everyone loves getting a new toy. Like, I bet you're thrilled about that. Everybody loves that. I can see why you're so excited about it. And it's always an and, it's never a but. And we agreed that we were going to be living on a budget. We now aren't on that same budget because you've gone outside of the budget. And as a result of that, I'm feeling this, and this. And as a result of those feelings, I need to do this, and this. So I can still see you. I'll give you another personal example of this, maybe a better example. My wife has struggles with my parents. She often comes to me and she talks to me about the struggles that she's having. I actually don't see it the same way that she does. Right? This could be its own webinar, probably, this topic for a lot of people. But she then asked me what I think of it. My empathy response is, geez, Rhiannon, like, I can see how much of a struggle this is for you. I can only imagine what it's like to want to be able to be closer to them than you are, and to have these things play out in ways that can be so deeply offensive sometimes. I get why you're feeling the way you do. That's got to be really, really hard. And I hope that you're able to work through those things. I don't see them the same way. So I'm here for you. I'm willing to be as close or as distant as you want me to be right now. But I don't see it the same way. Right. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. The next question is, how do I figure out which shame screen I use? I know I use one of them, but I'm not sure what I do. How do I discover or become aware of what I do?
That's a good question. We probably use all three some of the time, but we probably default to some more than others. So, like, I tend, in my relationship with my wife, she tends to default into the moving against, and I default into the moving away, which becomes an interesting dance, because now she's chasing me, getting more and more aggressive, and I'm pulling away more and more. And then she's wondering why she's getting abandoned, and I'm wondering why I'm getting smothered. Right. And so certain ways to identify them would be, again, physiology. What is it that you actually have go on inside of you? If you have anger come up, if your jaw starts to clench, your face starts to flush, you get ready to say cutting words, you're definitely moving into a moving against shame screen, right? If you feel yourself want to disappear or shut down, or my youngest daughter, she's got this amazing poker face that when she gets in trouble, she just goes straight stone face. Like you can't get to her in any way to have a conversation with her unless you get her moving again. She's got a great moving away shame screen. And if you're in a relationship with somebody, I wouldn't recommend doing it in the heat of the moment, but sometimes a discussion with one another out of the heat of the moment, your partner will see some of those things even before you know they're there. Right. So my wife knows, oh, when Tyler clenches his jaw, he's moving into the move against shame screen. Like he's about ready to say something that he's going to regret. Sometimes she'll catch up before even I do. And so it could be physiology. It could be the words that you're using. It could be the patterns that you see in the dance. If you feel like you're the one always being chased, you're probably moving away. If you're the one always chasing, you're probably either moving against or moving towards. So.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is, I experience a lot of apathy around a lot of my relationships in life. What do you recommend will help me feel more connected?
That's a good question. I would probably ask, and we don't have time for this, but if you were coming to therapy, I'd probably want to explore where what's underneath the apathy. Is it some form of self-protection based off of past life experiences? Is there some sort of belief system that's attached to that apathy? Sometimes that apathy is almost like a secondary sort of protection from other things that had been happening. And I just sort of kind of go into that space, kind of like learned helplessness, where I'm going to get shocked anyway. I'm just going to kind of like just not take any action, almost like I don't want to put myself out there in order to run the risk of getting burned again. And so there might be some past trauma that needs to be looked at or dealt with. There might be some burnout that's happening. Maybe you're running yourself too ragged in other parts of life, and so there's not a lot of energy to give to those important relationships. I'd start by exploring either one of those options, and then of course the self-care piece that we talked about earlier.
Perfect. Somebody was wondering what the self-compassion website that you suggested, that resource, was.
Yeah, selfcompassion.org. And you can also find, if you just type in Kristin Neff, she's probably one of the forefront researchers on self-compassion.
Perfect. And then somebody said that you used the phrase healthy repetition. What does that look like?
Yeah, so think I really like a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. It's a kind of a self-help book. One of the very first chapters, there's a phrase in there that I love that says, it's like a mantra that says, I will form good habits and become their slave. So if you think of us as human beings, we're basically doing stuff every single day. Most of us woke up at the same time that we always wake up at. We followed the same morning routine, whether it's healthy or not. We go through the same motions of our day-to-day lives, whether that's healthy or not. And we just do it automatically because we've done it so many times before that it's just the habit. The beautiful thing about habit is it can change if it's done differently enough times. And so healthy repetition would be things like, I realize that I have self-talk that goes on in my head all day long, every day. In my situation, it was failure. Tyler, you're such a failure. I'd get done with a therapy session and I'd already have in my brain, you messed up here and you messed up there and you messed up there. Like, these are all the ways you're a failure. The minute that I started seeing or feeling that sense of shame or those thoughts, I would plug in the practice of self-compassion. And at first it didn't feel true. It didn't feel like, I didn't feel convicted in it, but I remember doing it. I learned about self-compassion from my boss. I started doing it, and about a month into doing it, I was doing it anywhere from 10 to 20 to upwards of 100 times a day. I remember about a month into it, I got done with a therapy session and I had this weird experience of being aware of watching this happen, almost like removed from myself. My shame kicked in. And before I could even choose to do the self-compassion came in right over the top of it. It was like, yeah, Tyler, you're a work in progress. You're going to get better. You're eventually going to become a really great therapist, but you're pretty young right now. And it's okay. You're learning, you're growing. And it happened automatically. And so the forced repetition of the self-compassion over the course of a month led to the habit forming of self-compassion, which is now carried with me for several years. And it happens almost automatically now just because it's been practiced so much.
That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
The next question is, how can I be vulnerable when I don't feel safe and connected with my spouse after his affair and continued contact with his affair partner?
That's a really good question. I'll kind of go to another quote by Brene Brown on this. This is a really hard part about vulnerability. Not everybody deserves to hear your story, right? I have my story. I'm pretty open with it. I mean, if you guys want the full story, you can go look it up on the internet. I posted it there, but most people aren't like me. Certain people will get more details and more of the kind of inner self than other people will, based on whether or not they're trustworthy. So I'm probably not going to be overly vulnerable with my spouse until there's actual real recovery happening. And real recovery would mean I'm turning away from the behaviors that have caused the problems. I'm going to work on myself and my shame resiliency and my trauma. I'm investing myself in the kinds of things that are going to help me to become the kind of person that I want to be and that you deserve to have as a partner. If those things aren't happening, you're probably not going to be that vulnerable with that person. You're going to have to find other relationships to be vulnerable with until there's a basis of trust that's rebuilt. And I know we could go, man, this could be a whole nother webinar on how to rebuild trust, because it's a huge, hard, long process when there's been that kind of betrayal. And I'm sorry that you guys are going through that. Because I know, sorry, you're going to get me emotional. I know what that's like to go through, at least on the one side of it. And I can only imagine what you're feeling right now. Share at the level that's just uncomfortable enough to stretch yourself, but also at the level that you know you can fall back onto your boundaries if it's not held properly. So it's a weird fine line that will take a minute to probably nestle into to learn where the space is for that relationship. But you can't totally close off if you're trying to rebuild the relationship. But you should not be opening yourself up all the way until you actually see an active work on the other side that's trying to learn how to hold it. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. We'll just have this one last question before we close out. And they say, how can I let go of being judgmental when I enjoy judging others so much? Being judgmental is a big obstacle to empathy and shame resilience.
It's a massive obstacle. Like I love judging too. We all love to judge. It's in our second nature. So one thing that I like about the idea of judgment in terms of like mindfulness is that it's not that we don't ever judge, it's that we become aware of the judgment, we acknowledge the judgment, and then we practice letting it go. So it's okay if you love judging other people. It's a way to protect self. It's also a different form oftentimes of unhealthy, non-vulnerable shame resilience attempts. So it makes total sense that it happens. But if you can become aware of it, then you can at least notice it and then practice letting it go. And certain kinds of meditation and mindfulness on noticing and letting go can actually be really helpful. It's a skill that you can develop where you can see it more and you can let it go more often. So hopefully that's helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you everyone else for coming and showing up today, for your participation and your questions. It's what makes these webinars work and be so successful. Once again, if you did attend this webinar for a CEU credit, make sure to stay on till the webinar ends for your survey and certificate, or email into the UMC email, which is marriagecommission@usu.edu for your survey. Upon completion of that survey, you'll get a certification email back from us. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.